I was out with a male Goshawk, and I had a Brittany Spaniel at the time. And this Brittany I had trained to point rabbits. And the Brittany went on point, and I walked up there with the Goshawk on the fist and, getting ready to give it a kick. And the dog yelped and started spinning around in circles with a muskrat attached to its lip. And there was blood everywhere, and the Goshawk latched on to the muskrat and the dog. And it just was a complete debacle. It was a mess. It was horrible.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Falconry Told podcast. And appreciate you all continuing to join us on our continued travels throughout the U.S. and different parts of the world. Your continued support is much appreciated. And speaking of support, I have to give a quick shout out and a quick thank you to the continued support from Yaga Crafts out of Poland. You all have heard me brag many, many times over now about the wonderful handcrafted equipment that he makes. It's great stuff. If you haven't yet, definitely check out the hybrid jesses he makes or some of the anklets that he makes with Marshall's easy twist nuts sewn into them. Great stuff. If you haven't had a chance to check out any of it yet, head to @Yaga Goshawk on Instagram, or you can find his other contact information on our website at falconrytold.com. It'll be well worth your time if you haven't yet. And before we launch into this conversation with this episode's guest of the Falconry Told podcast, I want to announce that the guest for this episode is also going to be one of our newest sponsors, and that's Seth Roy from North Mountain Goshawks. And if you haven't seen any of the birds that he's produced fly, I can attest to seeing some fly in person, and he produces some really good birds in this propagation project. And his facilities and his whole operation is second to none. I really admire all of the time, effort, and energy that he's put into it, and he's got a beautiful property that he produces these birds on. So if you're in the market soon for a new goshawk, I highly recommend you get in touch with him. He specializes actually in parent-reared goshawks, but if you're in the market soon for a new North American, East Siberian, or Finnish goshawk, then I highly recommend you head to northmountaingoshawks.com, fill out that contact form that's on the website, and get in touch with him. He produces some good birds, so if you give one a chance, I think there's a pretty good chance that you'll be pleased. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to this conversation that I had with Seth, and we do discuss his propagation project some, and he was nice enough to host us for an evening and have us out while I was recording some episodes not too far from him around the Jersey area recently, and it was really nice getting to know him some as well as his family and seeing that amazing property that he has out there. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation that I had with Seth Roy, and here we go. What's this called? How do you pronounce this?
It was a gift to me. I'm going to have to look at the can myself. Lau. It's German, I believe.
Okay, yeah, hence the 2 dots over the U.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I've been to Germany, let's see, 2 or 3 times now. I've had the privilege of having some German beer, but I've never had this. I mean, I like especially when I'm in Germany, I really like having the Hefeweizens. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, I mean, I've not ever had this before, so yeah, that's some good stuff, man. Thanks for sharing.
I've been to Germany a few times myself, and it is always a surprise to me the lack of beer variety. Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because they seem to be kind of beer snobbish in their own way, and it's almost kind of like a German mindset. I have many Germans in my life who I love very dearly and think very highly of, but they definitely are very set in their ways when it comes to certain things, and I've found that beer is no exception. But I don't know what your experience has been with that, but it really is. I don't know if you found this in your travels too, but I mean, it really is kind of a small world once you start getting around it. Yeah, I mean, what have been some of your other experiences kind of traveling abroad, or do you have many? I do. I've traveled abroad for hunting predominantly. Mm-hmm. I've been to Kamchatka. I've been to Russia hunting brown bear.
Okay.
I've been to Africa, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique a couple of times. I've been to France hunting, many places in the U.S., Canada, New Zealand. I think that checks the boxes there.
Yeah, it's not like that's not enough or anything. Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it, man. And it really is cool. I don't know, like, as you know, I was just recently in South Africa, kind of in and around like the Cape Town area and stuff for the podcast. And it really is interesting, the differences in all these places, not just from falconry, but I mean, just the different laws that they have, how they conduct themselves, you know, the type of industry that's involved with not just hunting, but a lot of other things in general. And I mean, so in all these different places, not necessarily even just like falcon related, but like with the hunting regs and things like that. I mean, what are some of the more interesting like differences that you've seen in some of these different countries that you've been, as far as how they go about organizing, orchestrating, and doing all this stuff?
I guess I would just speak in broad terms about that.
Sure.
For one, I'm always glad to come home. We live in a beautiful place. For anybody that has not traveled internationally, it really makes you appreciate what we have here. Many places are regulated to the extreme. Our falconer here is so liberal. We can do so many things, even though we do have regulations, but we don't have the government thumb holding us down at every corner.
And even though it is pretty much still one of the most, if not the most highly regulated hunting sport in our country, I do 100% agree with you, especially after seeing how things are in like South Africa in particular, you know, how their falconry works down there with the clubs and a lot of it.
They have a quota they have to put in ahead of time.
Yeah.
They're allowed to trap X number of whatever species, and they divvy it up.
Yep. And someone from the club's pretty much assigned to do the trapping for all the members. And even if you buy a bird, the club still technically owns the bird, even though you spend the money on it.
How would that fly here?
It wouldn't. It wouldn't. So that's why I always like talking to people that have experienced, especially falconry and other types of hunting in other countries, because for exactly the sentiment that you just said, it really does make you appreciate what you have already. And I mean, if you told people that there was a risk, like in the US in particular, like, you know, someone could just wave a magic wand and be like, well, I don't really like falconry. I don't really like I don't like being dependent on, you know, the limited resources. I don't have these resources to monitor it, regulate it. I'm just going to make it illegal.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it's illegal.
That happens many places.
Yep. And that wouldn't fly very well here either, I don't think. But yeah, man, as far as, you know, I mean, I will give you props. So, I mean, I can totally understand why you like coming back home. I mean, you've built a really nice place for yourself here. I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have you been here the majority of your life, or is this like?
We bought this property in 2016.
Okay.
So what's that? 7-ish years now. I spend an inordinate amount of time grooming my property for falconry. To make it easy for me to come home from work and spend 30 minutes or an hour without having to drive, especially when training birds. Keeps me closer to my kids and my wife, and keeps everything on an even keel.
And I'm sure that is just invaluable. I mean, time is everything. And, you know, there's no disputing that. Yeah, I mean, having all this land around your property here that it looks like meticulously in some spots groomed to be able to have that and just walk out your back door, man. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little jealous.
It was by design, not by accident.
No, I mean, obviously it's definitely obvious that this has been a planned thing for you. And no, I commend the hell out of you on it, man. It really is something that, I mean, for some people it takes a lifetime to get there. So, I mean, it's great that you've been able to get there and manage to this point. And yeah, I mean, you've got a hell of a place. Like I said, I don't really know what else to say. It's really nice.
Pretty cool to walk 100 feet from my back door and fly the Merlin earlier, huh?
Yeah, no, man, that was cool as hell. And, I think that if a lot of falconers saw what you're able to just kind of do out your back door here, there would be a lot of salivation and just a lot of overall just envy. It really is very interesting how, I mean, it's exactly like, you can't really describe it any better way. I mean, you can literally walk out your back door, be into game, and not even take 100 steps literally out your backyard. No, it's amazing. But what else are you flying? I mean, I know that we kind of had the imprint discussion a little bit ago, just in, touching not really a big fan.
Not my favorite form of falconry, no.
Yeah. So, I mean, what else are you currently trying to fly right now, other than, kind of grooming this Merlin and everything else?
So, unfortunately, for a guy that doesn't really particularly like imprints and places a high value on trapping passage birds, I am a Goshawk breeder, and I am imprinting 3 birds at once presently for the project. The sacrifices I'm willing to make, right?
I get it. Not from that angle, but we had that conversation a little bit a while ago too. But
yeah, so I have a small interest in trying to breed purlins. A very dear friend of mine and falconer bred purlins for a few decades. He passed away last May. And whenever he died, I obtained a couple of his Merlins and Peregrine Tiercel. So I thought, well, I'll go grab another Merlin this year and try and do that for him.
Yeah, see what happens.
Yep. So that's why I have the imprint Merlins. My first imprint Merlin. I've flown pretty many passage Merlins. I also have 2 imprint Goshawks right now, young birds. One is imprint female Finn from pretty unique stock that I held back. It took me several years to get something from her. I do breed Goshawks through natural pairs and natural copulation. That's my preferred method. However, it's difficult and not a sure thing. Where if I imprinted one of these young birds, I hate to put it like this, but a monkey could breed imprint Goshawks. I mean, it's not difficult. So I imprinted that bird, and then I also, it's like feast or famine. I was able to produce my first pretty special albitus tiercel, somewhat of a unique color, big bird. So I imprinted that bird as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been told that having, like an actual chamber pair and chamber raised Goshawks is definitely a lot harder. I wouldn't know anything about it. I'm just taking people's word for it. But I mean, I know that's why people love the imprint process so much and that are breeders in terms of Goshawks and stuff also, because there's less likely of a chance that, one's going to kill the other and all this kind of stuff.
It's impossible unless they get out.
Yeah. So,
breeding natural pairs. Myself, one of my mentors, Lance Christensen, breeds them. I don't know of anybody else that has continually produced natural paired Goshawks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've heard, I don't know Lance personally, but I've heard a lot about his breeding project and how he goes about chamber raising a lot of his Goshawks and stuff too. I mean, if he was your mentor, do you do things a lot of the same way? Have you kind of changed things up a little bit, or?
According to him, I am of a very rare sort that actually listens to what he tells me, and I do it, and it works.
Fair enough.
I was breeding Goshawks before Lance and I, we'll call it, partnered up. Mm-hmm. But he's certainly upped my game exponentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have a lot of guys I look up to in the sport, and he's definitely one of them.
Well, and I mean, for people that aren't familiar with the process, I mean, you don't have to go into like gory details or gritty details about it, but I mean, what kind of rigors do you have to go through?
It requires a much different mew setup, much different breeding facility. They require significantly bigger chambers. You have to keep the male and the female separated until the right time. I could talk about an hour about what is the right time. I'm not going to, because that's kind of like the secret sauce.
Yeah.
But whenever it is the right time, you put them together and cross your fingers, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And you might try that several times during a season. And sometimes they just won't get together. A pair that is bred religiously for a decade, the female might turn on the male one day and kill him. Mm-hmm. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. I mean, when you walk away from the imprint barn, you can go eat a meal, watch a movie, play with the kids. Whenever I walk away from my natural pairs and they're together, I'm on my phone all the time looking at the monitors. You know, when I'm at work, I've got a whole separate monitor set up to observe them, to see if the female's starting to get squirrely. You know, are they getting along? It's very stressful.
I can imagine. I mean, any kind of breeding project is stressful. I mean, anybody that I know that has breeding projects, as we were kind of talking in generalities earlier, I mean, you're chained to it. You're like almost a prisoner to it in a way for X amount of time. And I can't imagine being that worried about something. I mean, falconry in general can be stressful enough with all the different worries and concerns that you can have over the course of a season, just flying your birds, let alone having all this money, resources, and all these other things tied up into a breeding project that you're constantly having to monitor. So, I mean, I can only imagine.
Yeah. Falconry for me is not stressful. It's never been stressful for me. I've always been naturally in tune with the hawks, the falcons. But the breeding thing, you know, you have no control over it once you open those windows.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I mean, it's really admirable. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do it, and I don't know. There's so many different aspects about falconry past just the pure meat and potatoes of falconry with hunting your bird and stuff that I'm not really sure I would endeavor to get into, just because it's just such
well, when did you get into falconry? How old were you?
How old was I? Man, I was I mean, it was 2015, so I mean, I was in like 30 to 31, something like that. I just turned 40, so I mean, that was about 8 years ago. So maybe 31, 32, somewhere around there, I think.
Yeah, so you're right in the phase where you're starting to realize all the things you don't know.
Exactly. No, I mean, yeah, we were joking the other night with some of these other guys, you know, how you go through this phase where you know nothing, and then you're in it for a couple years and you think you know a lot. Yep. And then, you know, you kind of progress past another few years, fly a few more birds, whatever the case is. And you get knocked back down a few pegs. And then, you realize all the things that you don't know. But you're absolutely right. Yeah. No, I mean, what age did you get into it?
I've had birds all of my life since I was a teenager. Consistently trapped and flown birds. I think I'm 37. I've been hawking since I was 13. I had my first bird at, I think, 16.
Yeah.
Some years, I personally placed a high emphasis because one of my mentors placed a high emphasis on trapping and training passage birds. And I would go some years and trap and train a passage bird, kill a head of game and release it and trap another one. And I did that for a long time because I believe that's really the only way you can truly hone your skills and learn something.
Yeah, no, I completely agree because, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with it if that's what you want your personal falconry to be, is to fly like one bird for several years or whatever.
Would never look down on that or think less of anybody for that. It's, hey, does this bring you joy? Is it fun for you? Is it enriching in some way?
Yeah.
those are the important things.
For sure. No, I completely agree. But I do also 100% agree that, yeah, you don't really start learning and finding out what you don't know until you start working with, multiple birds of the same species over multiple species.
That's right.
I
had this talk with our mutual friend a couple of years ago, and he was spouting off about chamber raised goshawks and how they're pieces of crap. And I'm like, I said, well, buddy, have you ever flown one? Oh, no. Well, how many imprints you flown? Well, a couple. Did you ever fly passage bird? No. I said, you don't have a place at the table. I said, you don't get an opinion. I said, leave it at the door.
I love it. Absolutely love it. No, that's perfect, man. Yeah. And it's funny too, because you do have success with a couple of different species, and you might fly a couple birds, but they might both be passage birds, or they might both be captive bred or whatever. And I do agree. Like, once you start finding out the subtle differences between an imprint of a species versus a passage versus a chamber raised versus a secondhand, whatever. Yeah, that's when you really start to find out. You're exactly right. Like, it's when you really start to find out just all the different things that you really don't know.
Yep. There are no masters in this sport.
No.
If you spent a lifetime dedicated to imprint Cooper socks, you might call yourself a master of imprint Cooper socks.
Maybe.
But a whole lifetime, you couldn't master every aspect of Cooper socks.
Yeah, no, it's impossible unless you were just basically, even if you were gifted $1 billion and just made your lifetime endeavor all day, every day to be just nothing but birds, I still think it would be theoretically impossible.
Yeah,
because
it is.
yeah. And falconry lives, I think, for that matter, are all that much better for it. Because as I was talking to some of these guys the other night, you don't want to become a master of this.
No, it would be boring.
Exactly. If you felt like you become a master of something and there wasn't anything else to learn, then there's no point in really doing it anymore. It's like on to the next thing. Well, then what's the next thing?
It speaks volumes that there are so many, I'll call them old timers in our sport that have had raptors since they were, teenagers. Mm-hmm. Not once in their life did they ever set it down. There aren't many, I'll call it a hobby, but it's not really a hobby. There aren't many things you do in your life like that permeate every aspect of your life for your entire life.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And yeah, whether or not you want to call it a lifestyle, hobby, whatever, to some extent, everybody that's in this sport to some degree has to mold their life around it. To what extent is up to them.
Yeah.
But for sure, it's going to make an impact. There's going to be a sacrifice somewhere because of it. And yeah, to what extent people make that, it's their choice. But out of curiosity then, since you got into this so young, what was the spark? Like, what was the deciding factor for you getting into this?
I had no idea that falconry existed until I mentioned our business earlier in our conversation. Mm-hmm. That business started as a hobby, a side project for my dad. And he was importing Swarovski binoculars from Germany at the time. And a local falconer had found out that he was selling these things essentially out of our basement, and asked to come over and buy a pair of binoculars, and had mentioned in the conversation that he trained hawks and hunted with them. And my dad thought, well, that might be a neat thing for my boy to see. And I sometimes think he wishes he never asked him to bring his bird over, because it changed the course of my life. Mm-hmm. Every day I do something falconry related, and it hasn't made me any less successful as a person or as a husband or as a friend, but it's certainly a time suck. If you're doing it, you're doing it. You're not setting it down.
No, exactly. And that's like I just said a minute ago, man, it's just like, it's to what extent. Some people make it like their complete life endeavor. Some people, it's just a casual thing to do every so often on the side. A lot of people are kind of in between that. But I think as long as you can, make sure that you can have some degree of happiness and there's a balance,
That's it.
Yeah. I mean,
keeping things on an even keel, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
You look at around a lot of our contemporaries, high divorce rate.
Yep.
A lot of unhappy marriages.
Yeah. And then, even the falconry couples that become falconry couples, it's like, sometimes I wonder, because I've got a lot of friends that are, husband and wife falconers and things like that. And there's been some times where I've had this internal debate whether or not it would make life easier or harder.
You can talk to my wife. She holds a falconry license.
Well, she can be part of our roundtable later.
Oh, Jesus. You don't want that.
Yeah, I just, but I do have a spouse, though. That does that has the same profession as me.
Mm-hmm.
And some people think, oh, well, that makes your life a lot easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, it becomes like a competition of who had the crappier night, and who had, it's like, well, I had this bad, and well, I had, and then, so it makes you wonder if it wouldn't kind of, spiral down into that ring of hell.
Yeah, that's definitely a ring.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's your experience been with that then?
I met my wife freshman year of college.
Mm-hmm.
I was dating her for a very short amount of time, and I suckered her into getting a falconry license. So she trapped and trained a few red tails, and after that, just maintained the license.
Yeah.
So she understands the process and is very understanding of all of the birds in the house and the perch in her kitchen and her living room and her TV room.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important if in a spouse that they have an interest as absorbing as yours, not necessarily the same interest.
Mm-hmm.
So her interest is horses. She rides horses every day.
Yeah.
So she doesn't give me any flack whenever I say I'm doing something with the birds, because I don't give her any flack whenever she's going out to scoop horse crap.
No, that's a good relationship, I think. It all goes back to the balance thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, so do you guys breed horses too?
No, she
just have them?
She just rides.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm embarrassed. I can't speak about it more eloquently, but I think it's dressage or hunter jumper. My kids are in pony club. They ride every day as well. But they get on the horse and they do things. That's all I know. Not my thing. I don't get along with the horses. The horses don't get along with me.
No, that's fair enough, man. I'm pretty ignorant to that too. And I know enough about horses to be able to look at a horse and be like, yeah, it's a horse, Yep. But I mean, talking like when I did my podcast with Harry McElroy and I've talked to other people that are in that world, and they start throwing out, the terminology of the horse world and stuff. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah. Doesn't float my boat.
Yeah. Elaborate on that just a little bit more, because I have no idea what the hell you just said.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Well, that's cool. I mean, like I said, everybody's lives have different, I don't know, hurdles, hoops, whatever, to kind of go through. And like I said, you're another person, it sounds like, that, I don't know, it makes life a little bit easier than, having a spouse that is already kind of in that world a little bit. And
it wouldn't work if she wasn't understanding.
Yeah.
I think I told her when I met her, we were a year in, she started giving me some issue with a bird. And I said, look, the birds were here before you. The birds will be here after you. Do I feel that way today? No, I love her very much. And I'd be devastated if something would have happened from my hubris as a dumb youth. But yeah.
No, it's cool. You're winking across, the table at me right now. It's cool. We're making sure the bases are covered, man. It's all good. Yeah. No, I'm sure he loves you very much. No, it's all good, dude. Yeah. No, I'm married to someone who's very independent as well, and all the different things that I do wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for someone who was understanding, and I think also didn't enjoy their time away from me at times too. So, but I mean, yeah, everybody figures out the way that things work for them. So. But as far as, kind of going back to the breeding project, then I am curious too. So whenever you do have birds that are hatched and you have these different chambers, and I mean, how do you go about, chamber raising some of these birds then? I mean, is there anything, you don't have to go into this, if there's a special sauce or a special, recipe for that, you don't have to go into super detail either. But I mean, how do you go about like getting these birds kind of, socialize with each other and, keep them from...
Well, I think there's an important distinction in the terminology, and everybody wants to use the word chamber goshawk. But a more appropriate term for what I'm doing would be called parent-reared goshawk.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
There's a dad, there's a mom, they're in the chamber, they're doing everything. There is no human intervention. Mm-hmm. I believe that is of the utmost importance. I've tried. I thought, well, I'm going to let an imprint female goshawk raise these babies in an imprint chamber and look at everything that an imprint would normally look at, people, cars, lawnmowers, parties, dogs, and think, yeah, I'm going to get the best of all worlds. I'm going to get a calm goshawk that's basically manned coming out of the chamber without all the work of an imprint. Passage manners. I couldn't have been more wrong. I couldn't have been further from the mark. I had a very skittish goshawk that it was the worst of all worlds. And I did that and realized very quickly, this isn't how you do this. I spoke with a lot of, the old timers out there, and they corroborated my one-off event, and I never did it again. You can't control the positives, the negatives, or the neutral experiences of a hawk like that. And because I am of an exceedingly controlling nature, I want to make sure in any hawk that I train, everything that I do with it is a positive experience. And so in all of my training, from the time let's say I trap a bird, I put a hood on it very slowly, very calmly. I let that bird relax, and I feed it through the hood, and I get it to eat on a cue. I squeak like a mouse, and it bends over and eats. When I take the hood off, it is already eating on cue, and it bend down and they eat invariably every single time. And a lot of people, I tell them that and they're shocked. Well, doesn't that have them, try and destroy your glove or destroy the perch when they're in the hood? I said, no, boys, girls, we're not feeding them through the hood forever. This is just in the beginning, depending on the bird, a day to a week. So that the first time I take the hood off of a fresh trapped bird, it's going to eat. It's not going to hang upside down. It's not going to bait and have a negative experience. I'm not going to take the hood off for a week and hope that it eats. That's foolishness. That's actually one of my pet peeves, that people will starve a hawk down to get it to do what they want. Every time the hawk is on the fist, it gets a positive experience.
Okay. And so I'm assuming then, whenever you take a bird from the parent reared experience.
Okay. So I use the word passage because that's a lot of my experience, but I've trained a bunch of parent reared birds too.
But the approach is
similar.
Same
exact approach. That goshawk comes out knowing that it's a hawk. It was raised by hawks, and because of their age, they're very easy to manipulate and train. They're not like a passage bird that's experienced freedom and has been out and had all these other experiences. The typical parent-reared goshawk pulled from the chamber, in my experience, is killing bagged game from the fist, 10 to 14 days. That first week is a very easy manning session with food.
Okay. And I mean, so it pretty much comes straight from the chamber then with the parents. You don't like intermix other birds that with in other chambers or anything like that?
No,
like,
if you mix siblings up, that can go wrong. The females in particular are very aggressive. So I will leave a clutch of youngsters, which could have came from different birds in the beginning. They don't have to be related, but they have to be raised together. That's the important part.
Gotcha.
So you have 3 or 4 goshawks in a chamber. Whenever they're about hard penned, you pull them out and train them.
Okay. And when you say that on average that you like to have, your experience, them taking bad game or whatever within 10 to 14 days. Are you using anything, training tool wise in that interim also? I mean, are you using like lure machines or anything like that? Or are you doing anything kind of in the interim with that as well?
I say bag game, lure machine,
interchangeably. Okay.
Yeah. The important thing with training young birds is that you do not appear to be the source of
the food,
all the all the food that, what am I trying to say?
You don't want them, the food association.
Yeah. I personally don't do a food association with any of my young birds. You showed up and there was a goshawk out to hack. Mm-hmm. The way I get that bird back is I'll set up some sort of baggie. I'll track it down with the telemetry, or I'll just pick it up off the ground. But I very rarely will go out with the lure machine or with the lure and just call the bird down. Mm-hmm. I have almost zero recall over any of the young birds that are flying around in my yard all day.
Okay.
I find ways to pick them up and get them inside for the night.
Okay.
No, my daughter is peeking through the window. I don't know what she wants. She's just waving. She's just looking. She is a falconer as well.
She is?
Yep.
Really?
Not on paper, but she has helped train 3 birds over 3 seasons.
Well, I mean, she probably already knows way more than most apprentices then.
I would argue that she knows way more than most falconers.
Yeah, there is that. I was going to let you say it, not me, I know you're probably partial, but...
I'm actually very hard on my kids. I shouldn't be. She can hood any bird she picks up. She knows how to tie a falconry knot. She can walk a hawk out to a perch, and she's 8 years old.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. Maybe I should be talking to her then,
You should be.
No, that's cool, man. Well, and I just want to say also, I have to give you guys props. You're very polite. And I was very impressed, whatever. And it's like, hi, my name, if you want something to drink,
They're just animals. You got to train them the same way.
It's like, I'll give you the tour later. Okay. No, it's very, very, very polite daughter you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, major props to you on that as well. But, well, that's cool, man. I'm glad that my kid, he's 15 now. He could give 2 craps less about falconry. Yeah, he really has no interest. I think he's been hunting with me maybe 3 times and wasn't a big fan of it each time. So I never forced him. But well, and so I guess that pretty well covers. In a nutshell, kind of what you do with your breeding project and kind of what your general approach is to. Some of the dealing with these birds initially and stuff, but I want to go ahead then. And, I don't know if you were given the heads up. I hope you were, but I hope you have a couple of particular hunting stories or something that kind of come to mind, or a couple of experiences. It doesn't have to be hunting per se, experiences with, either hunting, birds, dogs, your breeding project, anything that kind of come to mind as, some of your more fond memories in falconry.
When you pulled in, Casey said, hey, he probably will ask you this question. So I had a little bit of a prep.
Yeah.
I've been, like I said, I've had hawks for 2+ decades now. And every day you go out, there's always something interesting to see. So it's hard to think about one particular experience, but I do remember one hunt that was quite funny in hindsight. I was out with a male goshawk, and I had a Brittany Spaniel at the time. And this Brittany I had trained to point rabbits. And the Brittany went on point, and I walked up there with the goshawk on the fist and, getting ready to give it a kick. And the dog yelped and started spinning around in circles with a muskrat attached to its lip. And there was blood everywhere. And the goshawk latched onto the muskrat and the dog. Mm-hmm. And it just was a complete debacle. It was a mess. It was horrible.
And you were doing what this whole time?
Cussing, yelling, screaming, trying to kill the rat, and trying to kick the dog, trying not to break feathers on the goshawk.
Oh man, that's hilarious. It seems like every falconer's got at least one of those debacle stories. You really haven't been a falconer longer than 5 minutes if you haven't just had at least one complete cluster of a hunt at some point in time.
When you think about everything can go wrong when you're out there with a wild bird and in an unstaged place, it all can go wrong.
For sure. And especially once you start incorporating dogs and other things, like every new X factor that you incorporate, it's like the percentage, like,
yeah, you incorporate your buddies or other falconers and the X factor goes through the roof.
Oh yeah, for sure. Even something that doesn't seem like it would be that big of a deal all of a sudden gets multiplied exponentially whenever you have eyes and you have to listen to the heckling afterwards too. Yeah, no, that's hilarious. Well, I mean, what was your biggest achievement, just out of curiosity, like with this massive breeding project that you've worked so hard to build up and stuff too? I mean, what's been kind of your crowning achievement so far?
We all have personal goals, and like this year, my goal was to hatch every fertile egg that I had, and I did it. I hatched eggs that were thin-shelled, pockmarked, oblong, too small, too big. I had 100% hatch rate on fertile eggs, which I thought was pretty cool because it's not as easy as just throwing them in an incubator. They're not chickens.
Yeah.
Tracking weight loss to the 100th of a gram and having to manipulate those eggs in various ways to get them to hatch. It kind of flips my switch.
All the power to you, buddy. God. Well, like I said, man, that the thought of managing that, like I said, it just stresses me out. I mean, I'm glad that guys like yourself, get your kicks off of it. I mean, I'm super thankful for guys like you because we all have our thing, and it's the same thing with like guys that make hoods and everything. I mean, there's so many different things that I know I'm so glad that there's people that continue to want to do it because don't see myself ever doing it. So, well, and real quick too, before we kind of wrap this up, then, I mean, what's been kind of like out of curiosity, what's been one of your biggest disappointments? I mean, have you ever had any seasons that you just had something you were super bummed about as far as either your breeding project or your own personal falconry or?
Boy, I'd have to think about that. In hindsight, I certainly don't have any regrets, even if I did fail, because you ultimately come out of those situations having learned something. Mm-hmm. And I may be kind of like the glass is half full instead of half empty type of person because I don't dwell on those. And honestly, if I had a bad time, I probably shoved it out of my brain. I couldn't give you an example.
Well, that's even more rare.
It's not because there weren't any.
Yeah. Okay. Well, perfect. Yeah, I mean, of course, we all have instances where, like even if it's something that we didn't think would turn out very well or whatever, I mean, they're all learning experiences for better or for worse. As we've said many times before, we're always paying tuition, into these experiences, and it's a constant learning experience. But, well, no, that's cool, man. And I'm sure that you have to have that attitude to a large degree doing what you do. I mean, especially with your breeding and everything else, you're going to eventually run into things. And if you get disheartened by the first thing that comes along or even the 100th thing that comes along,
you wouldn't be a falconer very long if you threw in the towel with every little small thing that happened.
Exactly. Well, cool, man. This has been cool. I mean, it's been nice getting a chance to see your property, get to know you, and I really appreciate the invite once again out here. I mean, it really means a lot. And before we wrap this up, I do want to get one last thing from you. For the last, I don't even know how many podcasts now, especially with guys that have been doing this as long as yourself, I know there's probably at least one decent like piece of advice or sentiment that you could probably pass along to people that, probably sticks out more so than others in your mind also. I mean, would you mind giving a piece of advice to, future or even current generations of falconers? And
something that was told to me when I was younger, and I think about it with every single hawk that I train, it was so simple, but it was to think like a hawk. It was to just put yourself in that position and try and figure out what is it that the hawk wants, what the enjoyment or whatever it is they get out of it. And that has helped me through a lot of problems with my falconry.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I mean, thinking of anything from whatever else perspective is always a good thing, because you can't really have tunnel vision when it comes to this stuff by any stretch. That's when I think people start really getting into trouble, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I guess, like I said, we can go ahead and probably call this good then. I know we're probably going to end up talking smack and having another fun conversation with a couple other guys later.
I've got couple of pork shoulders on the barbecue.
Yeah, I know, man. It smelled delicious.
We've got a big night ahead of us.
Oh, for sure. And we've also got some sweet baby Jesus to drink also here in a little bit, and maybe even some Kraken if some people want it, and everything else. That's where sometimes I wonder if people like think I'm an alcoholic when they listen to this podcast, because I'm always like going ahead and just clacking glasses together at the beginning and always just asking people what they like to drink and stuff. I swear I'm not that heavy of a drinker, but anyway, it's definitely fun with especially falconry gatherings, man. It's a very cool way to break the ice with people, and like I said, I appreciate the beer and the conversation, man. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for driving out to see me.
No, for sure, man. Like I said, thanks for the invite, and we'll go have some barbecue and some more beer.